Hello listeners, Jordan here. I just want to let you know that you can listen to Nighttime early and ad-free on Amazon Music. Include it with Prime.
You are listening to Canadian Gothic, a series by the Nighttime Podcast.
Hello listeners. In this episode of Nighttime, you're going to hear a discussion about a story that can only be described as horrific. And I'm going to include some brief but disturbing audio samples as we go. So I suppose take that as your warning to proceed with caution, or perhaps sit this one out if you're sensitive to that sort of thing. The story we're going to be discussing takes us to Sagkeeng First Nation in Manitoba. In April of 2017, this small community of about 3,000 people would host an event that would be watched around the world. Specifically, it'll be watched by those who lurk on the internet's darkest spaces, seeking videos of gore, death, and humanity's other darkest moments. Then 19-year-old Serena McKay's life would come to an end as the result of a vicious, violent, and merciless attack committed by two other young women. Some of the most brutal moments would be live streamed to Facebook, and from there, shared across the internet. In this episode of Nighttime, I've invited Canadian crime content creator Madelayne Klein to help me understand what happened to Serena, and possibly why. So let's get to it. Tonight, in this episode of Nighttime, I'll be joined by Madelayne Klein to discuss the murder of Serena McKay.
Beyond that broken police tape, an alleged fatal assault at that house on Saturday night. Possible video of it is now posted to Facebook, which appears to show 19-year-old Serena McKay being beaten, kicked in the face, while barely conscious. She was found dead in this yard the next morning. We're not showing the video. Chief Derek Henderson wants those that have it to delete it.
I watched the video and it was very explicit. It was very brutal.
School principal Claude Guimond says students brought the video to him. He sent it to police.
I'm assuming pretty well most of the kids saw it. Because it's out there.
Madelayne Klein. You've been a busy girl the last few days. You released a video, you're researching for new projects, you're always working on something. Tell us what you've been up to.
Well, I just posted my Kenley video on Tuesday, and that's kind of a piggybacking off of our episode.
Call it a companion piece. That sounds...
I like that. I like that a lot.
Appropriate, yeah.
And then next Tuesday, I am going to release a video on Andrew Paul Johnson, who I found out through our research of Kenley Matheson.
Yeah, so. Kind of like another companion piece.
Kind of, yeah, exactly.
Other than that research and that work you've been doing, what's new in your life? What's going on?
God, what's new? Not much.
No,
I'm trying to think. No, just...
It's winter. Everyone's miserable in Saskatchewan.
It's not as cold as it was.
Okay.
So
All right. Well,
it's only, I think we're like single digits, -5 maybe.
Okay. We have, here in Nova Scotia, within hours, snow is expected to begin falling, and this is said to be our first, snowfall of the season. And I'm very excited because I bought a new snowblower this year, so I'm bring it on. I'm going to dad out. My kids are upstairs. They have this whole routine they do when they want school to be canceled that involves putting ice cubes in the toilet. They put a spoon under their pillow, and I think they put one sock on, but it's inside out. There's this whole thing.
They're fairly superstitious.
When it comes to school being canceled, they would sell their soul to the devil, immediately if it would get them the day off school tomorrow.
I can't blame them.
Mm-hmm.
I was them. Yeah.
Yeah, I did. I sold it.
Did you know that I have been born and raised in Saskatchewan and I've never gotten a snow day?
How is that possible?
They're like, some of you may die, but that's a chance we're willing to take.
Really? Are you? I'm shocked to hear that. In Nova Scotia, we get so many snow days.
I know. Best we got was indoor recess, and it had to be -27.
Wow.
Yeah, it was torture.
they're just a different breed in Saskatchewan, maybe, and the
Oh,
government
they
knows, or the school boards know that. They're like,
dude, they
okay.
taught us how to line dance. It was just it's a different world over here. Like
Well, let's get into it. We have a story to discuss tonight that it's very rare that like the research into a case affects me in this serious of a way. Reading about this story, reading the details of what happened to Serena McKay, reading about what her family went through afterwards to get evidence of what happened to her pulled off the internet. This is truly like a Canadian horror story, also a modern day horror story because of the way the internet just kind of pokes at the open wound that, you know, her family and her community have. This story is literally hell on earth. I had only known the basics of it. It was you who told me a bit more about it. Why don't you give me a bit of your background on learning about Serena McKay and what happened to her? Because this is not local to you, but it's your part of the country.
yes, yeah, the neighboring province just right beside me in Manitoba. I did originally read about this case when it was happening, and I remember thinking like, "Oh my God, this is horrific." I never came across the video or anything like that,
Mm-hmm.
and this would have been in 2017, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But then years later, I start my crime talk journey, and Serena McKay was a name that kept coming up. And then once I looked her name up and started reading up on her, I thought, oh, of course, I know this case. And yeah, and then the more I looked into it, the more I learned about it
Mm-hmm.
then. And maybe a little bit over a year ago, I posted about her. But this case is, like you said, reading about it is horrifying. But this case is especially nightmarish because you can also watch it if you want.
Mm-hmm. And hear it, and yes,
Yeah.
it is absolutely
Well,
horrible.
it's disturbing.
Yeah, that's a very simple way to put it, but effective.
Yeah.
I recall like when it first happened, she was killed April of 2017 in a community called Sagkeeng, which is outside of Winnipeg, Manitoba. I remember the news traveling, and I remember hearing like a news report about the fact that the murder was caught on video, and there was efforts to have the video removed from Facebook and such. But I didn't get any further than that. Of course, I didn't seek out the video, and I didn't follow the case in any depth happening on the other side of the country than me, of course. But over the last few days, I went deep into reading and watching everything that was published about this case. And I think it's even worse than I thought initially, and probably worse than people know. What happened to Serena McKay, she was only 19 at the time, so she was just a kid. And what happened to her was done by two other kids, a 16 and 17-year-old. But it is cruel, it's brutal, horrific, and it's just some of the worst things that you could imagine human beings doing to other human beings. And yes, like you said, it's filmed, shared across the internet, and yeah, it's dark. So I guess that is a listener and viewer warning going into it. I think we've made it clear that this is not a nice story whatsoever.
Not for the squeamish, that's for sure.
Yeah. So let's start at the very beginning with Serena McKay. I managed to learn a bit about her, and mainly what I've learned from her came from news reports I found about her funeral. I think it was a CBC report about her funeral. Interviewed a few like kind of friends and family and community members. But what I was able to learn is she comes from a large, close-knit family. It was Serena and four siblings in the family, so five of them. She grew up in Winnipeg, but at the time of her death, she was living in a place called Pine Creek First Nation. But she wasn't going to school in Pine Creek. She was actually attending school in a nearby place called Sagkeeng First Nation, and there's Sagkeeng High School. At the time of her death, her murder, she was in the 12th grade, so she wasn't, this was in April, so she was just months away from graduating. Other than just kind of the broad strokes that I just covered there, was there anything you were able to learn about her, and who Serena was and what her life was like?
I know that I don't believe she was living with her parents or her mother at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say her mom said she started rebelling a little bit at like 15.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, at the time of her death, I want to say she was not living with her parents.
Okay. I don't think that would be abnormal, but
right. But yeah.
Yeah.
So she was away from home.
Yeah. And as far as interests and pastimes, when you read about her and look at photos and stuff, what I see is she was into beauty, like makeup and photography, lots of selfies with, makeup and her hair done and such. She was said to have had a love for music, and by all accounts, sociable, had lots of friends, was a regular young woman at the beginning of her life. The community that she was attending school in, though, Sagkeeng, to tell a little bit about that, I'm going to play a news clip because Sagkeeng, it's kind of shocking. It's only a small community. I think there are 3,000 people living there. It's about 120 kilometers away from Winnipeg. But despite being only 3,000 people, it has the country's highest per capita ratio of unsolved crimes.
Hello. These women wish they knew each other for a different reason. They have bonded over the murders of 2 young girls.
Still there, the pain is still there. It'll never go away.
Janet Briere's granddaughter is Vanessa Briere. Her body was found in the outskirts of Winnipeg in August 2007. 7 years later, Tina Fontaine's body was pulled from the Red River. Thelma Favel is outspoken in how Child and Family Services and the Winnipeg Police didn't protect her great niece.
Both Vanessa and Tina struggled with high-risk lifestyles before they were murdered. Of the 110 families that CBC spoke to, nearly 3/4 of their relatives were exploited in the sex trade, hitchhiked, or had drug and alcohol addictions.
There are at least 4 others with connections to Sagkeeng. Glenda Morso, her beaten body found in St. Boniface in 1991. Moira Herb, she was found in a remote area of Winnipeg between train tracks in 2003. Kelly Morso, found naked and stabbed in Gatineau, Quebec in 2006. Crystal Saunders, her body dumped in a ditch in St. Ambrose in 2007. Lillian Cook says so many Sagkeeng youth get into trouble because Winnipeg is so close by.
It is easy to get there, and you see people hitchhiking. We see our young people hitchhiking, and it's dangerous. It is very dangerous.
All 3 ladies say there needs to be more opportunities for youth in Sagkeeng and less involvement with CFS.
So when we talk about the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in Canada, we're talking a lot about communities like Sagkeeng that are affected. And Sagkeeng, looking at the numbers and the stats and just the profile of the stories coming out of this small community, it seems to be like, ground zero for, a lot of these problems. I'm shocked that much can happen in a small town, and we haven't even got into, Serena McKay's murder at this point. But I think this does a good job of kind of setting the scene for what kind of problems that community has, because I think they will manifest themselves in Serena's story. Alcohol, drug abuse, addiction, all of that kind of plays a role in them. So that's clearly something that this community is struggling with. And again, I don't think that's unique to this specific First Nation. Although the episode's titled, The Murder of Serena McKay, and that's what we're talking about, it begins as a missing persons case. And that's something, when I first learned about the story, I didn't know that from the beginning, that's how this begins. It starts on the evening of April 22nd into 23rd of 2017. And there's still a bit of a debate of when she actually died and when she was killed. But regardless, she was last seen by a family friend on Saturday evening, which was the 22nd. She was reported missing to RCMP Sunday, the 23rd, at about 6 p.m. So at this point, they didn't know where she was, who she was last with. She just hadn't returned home from a weekend away, presumably with friends from high school and stuff. But that's how it starts. And I can only put it this way, is that this ramps up very fast. So she's reported missing at 6 p.m. She's connected to Sagkeeng First Nation, not because she lives there, but because she goes to school there and has a lot of friends there. So, of course,
was there the previous evening?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So it's not a surprise that the search by the RCMP would begin in Sagkeeng. As RCMP officers are canvassing the area, checking in with friends and family and whatnot, trying to track down Serena, that's when a discovery is made by a community member. At about 8 p.m., just about 2 hours after she's reported missing, her body was found near a home on the First Nation.
Elma Kakakepenes found the body of 19-year-old Serena McKay on this yard in Sagkeeng First Nation.
She was just alone here on the ground. The remains were very badly damaged.
A late-night party on this quiet road Saturday night turned into a violent homicide,
where she describes the crime scene, and she doesn't go in great detail, but she certainly says, Serena was very badly damaged. So we don't know exactly what this woman's happened upon and what she found, but it wasn't somebody who fell and died. It was obviously like a violent end, was known from the very beginning. But there was still a question, of course, of what happened, and who did it. This is a high school student, so this happens on Sunday. The next day, school is still in session. Friends and community members and other students are just beginning to learn about Serena's death, and a fellow student had died. But they're also beginning to learn about a video that's surfacing on Facebook that appears to show, I've heard it described as a fight that Serena was involved in, but I wouldn't call the video anything resembling what I would refer to as a fight. I'm going to play a news clip that will describe the video in a basic sense and describe the video surfacing publicly.
Principal Claude Guimond is in crisis mode. All three young women attended his high school. The victim, Serena McKay, was planning to graduate this year.
The community is reeling because of this tragic incident which unfolded over the weekend.
What sickens him and many others is a bloody video circulating of a young woman being sworn at and stomped on the head.
So I watched the video, and it was very explicit. It was very brutal. I'm assuming pretty well most of the kids saw it, because it's out there.
The RCMP can't confirm the person in the video is McKay, but the spokesperson says,
I can't imagine what the family, the community is going through right now. Everyone is grieving. This is a 19-year-old female. This is someone's child, cousin, niece, sister. They're in shock. They're grieving over her loss.
Serena McKay's family is requesting privacy. They're also upset about that video. It was originally shared on a private messaging app, but now a longer version has been posted publicly on Facebook.
So we yet to get much of a description of the video, but listening to that report, I think it's pretty clear that it's dark and explicit. The principal's already involved. As you hear, the RCMP are already involved at the time that news clip that we just listened to aired. But how it actually gets to them and how it gets to that point is Monday morning at school, when news starts spreading about Serena being found dead. Students in the school actually went to the principal to let him know that she's dead, and there's this video that's going around on Facebook that people are sharing that seems to show her being beaten up very badly. And it was the principal who first involves the RCMP. He contacted the RCMP and got them in. So it wasn't until the next day at school that it becomes known that there's a video of seemingly showing what ended her life. And that must have been a pretty wild day at school as all that was going on.
I can't believe that the video was available and circulated for that long, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but how did...
And publicly, this didn't happen in the early days of the internet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's I know it's shock. I'm shocked by it. I'm not surprised that like nowadays, well, I guess nowadays in 2022, everything is filmed. I guess 2017 wasn't that long ago. Everything was filmed, but these companies are slow to react. So if something horrible is filmed and it gets put on the internet, it's going to take them a while to catch it and take it down. But even when they do, like if you point your finger at Facebook for having responsibility in this video being shared, it's more so a problem with the internet. It's in this specific case, it started on Facebook, but that video very quickly was saved to people's phones and computers.
Oh, absolutely. And the internet is forever.
Yeah, exactly. And at the time that the video surfaces, there is still some question as to whether or not it even is Serena. When you see the video, I'm going to describe it in a basic sense, but the video it's dark, it's hard to see what's happening, but there's clearly a woman, which is Serena, on her back on the ground. It seems that someone is punching her in the face and screaming obscenities at her.
Me and her will kill you our selves.
Serena, you can make out her voice a little bit at the beginning, saying something that sounds like "I'm sorry." The woman or the young girl, the child who's hitting her, is shouting obscenities, threatening her. And then at one point, the girl beating her gets up and says says to someone else, like, "You take over. I'm done. I don't want to see her alive."
Fucking come take over her. Come on, please. I don't want to fucking see her alive.
And then the other person who takes over beats her even more violently, because it's like stomping on her, and Serena seems to be unconscious for a lot of this, but you can't even tell who it is because she's so badly injured, even at the time that the video starts. Like it is truly like when you talk about those horrific, gory videos that are on the internet that usually come from other parts of the world and not Canada, this is one of those videos for sure. Except it's
absolutely
clearly from Canada. And
and that there were more people there because someone was recording, and you can see somebody, she tries to like defend herself and put her arms up, and someone pulls her arms away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you also hear someone in the background say she's done, as in like, stop beating her, but that didn't make any difference. And there are two versions of this video. One is very short, like I think like 20 seconds, and then there's one that's just about a minute. That's both versions were spreading around like wildfire when this first happens. But here's how we get to the perpetrators being discovered. So of course the video is getting spread around. You can hear one of the people responsible, one of the girls doing this, say the other girl's first name. So you can hear their names said in the video. At one point, you can get a look at one of the girls as they're bent over Serena, hitting her. So as this video surfaces, of course, RCMP are then going towards people responsible, but actually one of the girls responsible, I'm not going to use their names because there's a publication ban. We'll just call them 16 and 17 because it's a 16-year-old and a 17-year-old. I believe it's the 16-year-old girl was the one who realized she was going to be busted. And she was at school that Monday, and she went to the guidance counselor and just told the guidance counselor what she did. The guidance counselor then involved the RCMP. And, that Monday, arrests were made of a 16-year-old girl and a 17-year-old girl. Both friends, acquaintances, fellow students at the same high school as Serena. This is, when I saw and heard the video and everything that happens in this story, that much kind of evil and anger and hate can come out of a 16 and 17-year-old child. I'm shocked.
It's just like, how are you so nonchalant after?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, it's bizarre.
Yeah, and we'll get into a bit more when we get into like kind of the trials, and we'll learn what exactly happened and what they did. But at this point, the arrests are made. The community is grieving and mourning Serena. There's questions about how this happened, why this happened, what the motivation was. Was it a fight? Was it a murder? You know, how many people were involved, who saw it, who filmed it, how did the video get spread on the internet? But I think the big question from the very beginning seemed to be like, we're going to deal with all that other stuff, but how do we get this video off of the internet?
Yeah. First things first.
Yeah. And that in all the early news reports were dominated by like saying to the public, if anyone has this video, if you've seen this video, delete it, don't share it, don't put it out there. But again, the internet doesn't work like that. And
no,
this was spread far and wide. It's a horror story, and even her family, like her poor mother, was on the news, like pleading with people and pleading with Facebook, like because initially it started on Facebook, and that was really where it started spreading. So there was a lot of attention being directed towards Facebook to remove the video. They eventually did remove it, but the damage was already done.
Yeah.
Today was all about celebrating Serena McKay's life and not focusing on her death. It was an incredibly heartbreaking but moving service. Every pew at this Winnipeg church was full. A number of family and friends traveled from surrounding communities and as far away as Alberta to be here. We learned Serena preferred to go by the name Serenity. She grew up in Winnipeg but had ties to Pine Falls, Peguis, and George Gordon First Nation. Her kokum, her great aunt, spoke about Serena's dreams to work up north and visit the mountains and the ocean. She says her heart is shattered by the loss. Serena was set to graduate grade 12 this June, and the family was pleased to learn she will be granted her diploma posthumously. Sagkeeng Anishinaabe High School is also setting up a scholarship in her name. Alma Kakakapenes is the elder who found Serena's body. She came to pay tribute to the teen and find out more about the young woman who she never met.
She came here to teach us, and we need to follow that change. She came here to teach us about the missing and murdered. This is number 12 that I'm aware of in Sagkeeng, and everybody says it never should have happened, but it did. And we need to move on and heal now.
That was one of the key themes from the pastor and the family today. They asked everyone to make it their resolve to keep young people and Indigenous women safe.
It must be hard to have a funeral and mourn with a video of the murder being spread around and going viral, and for the children in this small community to be involved. Like when something happens in a town of 3,000 people, like everybody is connected to the victim, the perpetrators. This is unimaginable.
It's a small world in general, and I couldn't imagine living somewhere with 3,000 people. Everyone would know everyone's business.
Oh, absolutely. And then even in that clip, like one of the people at the funeral was like, I'm the one who found her body, and and everybody's related to everyone. One of the women arrested, I'm calling them women, 16 and 17, I guess, are girls. One of the girls arrested is a relative to like the chief. I think she was his niece. So it's
I heard granddaughter.
Okay, I'll go with what you heard, but I knew there was a relation. But it's it's. An event like this obviously turns the whole community on its head in the worst possible way.
It really rattles people.
Yep. And so little was known. We now are looking at this case from 5 or 6 years later, and we have the benefit of the legal process having run its course and all of that information coming out. But even at the time of like Serena's funeral, there were so many questions about what happened. And because of that, I want to jump ahead to the actual trials, because what happens is, of course, we know there's two people arrested, 16 and 17. They are alleged to be the two girls in the video that are beating her. It starts with 16 beating her, And it ends with 16 passing it over to 17, saying, like, you take over. I don't want to see her alive. What I couldn't understand is how these charges were selected, because 16 ended up being charged with and pleading guilty to manslaughter, where 17 pled guilty and was charged with second-degree murder. But in reading the facts of the case, to me, it seems like their involvement is completely equal. I can't really see why unless it was just the way the negotiation went down, I just can't see why one had more serious charges. Although they were both charged as minors. So when I say serious charges, we're not talking long prison sentences when a minor, is convicted of these sorts of things, than the other. Why one is manslaughter and one is second-degree murder. So I'm going to read you some of a timeline of what actually went down the night of the 22nd, that Saturday night. So McKay and the two friends or acquaintances, 16 and 17, were at a house party on Sagkeeng First Nation, Saturday, April 22nd. There were 4 other teens with them. The group included the boyfriend of 17. So it was Serena, 16, 17, 17's boyfriend, and 3 others. Late into the evening at some point, they're all drinking, and everyone in the party is said to be heavily intoxicated. Serena McKay ends up getting in an argument with 16 over alcohol. What the argument was or accusations were or what exactly happened, I have no idea, and I don't know if the public knows, but it's said to be related to alcohol. 17, and it was almost like a fight was starting inside. And 17 gets involved trying to calm Serena down. She has Serena in a bathroom at one point, trying to prevent a fight from breaking out. If you follow the story that comes out in court, it's said that Serena seems to be the aggressor, that Serena is mad at 16 and is needing to be calmed down and taken away from 16. That's the version that comes out in court. But again, the version that comes out in court is 16 and 17's version, because Serena was killed and wasn't able to tell her side of the story. But anyway, at some point in the party, 17's unable to calm Serena down or separate them or whatnot. They end up outside. The version that is told in court is that Serena was kicked out of the party. But whatever happens that leads to them getting outside, 16 and Serena end up in a fight. And the video starts during that fight at some point. The 2 separate videos that are filmed. The fight happens in the yard of the house. We don't know what happens before the video starts. We don't know what happens after it, but the video certainly shows the part of the fight that leads to Serena not being able to get up and walk away from whatever happened. She's not able to defend herself. Other people are helping. There's multiple people stomping on her. She's very much, by the end of the video, she's very much unconscious while someone is just hitting her in the face as hard as they possibly can. And I'm pretty sure you can even hear bones breaking without her even putting like her hands in front of her face. She's, and she's unrecognizable, covered in blood, of course.
Had she survived, she would have never been the same.
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
It was
wouldn't
brutal.
have acted the same, wouldn't have looked the same, wouldn't have lived a normal life.
No.
After the video ends and after whatever happens outside happens, all of the other people witnessing it, so 16, 17, the other people that were outside filming and watching this, and we don't know who they are, they all go back inside, continue the party, and they lock the door because according to them, they were afraid Serena was going to come back in. So they lock the door, continue the party, go to sleep. And they don't check on her. They don't notify anyone. They're, again, said to be intoxicated. And I don't know if that's the excuse for how they didn't know that she was obviously dead and or dying. But that's what they decided to do. According to the court documents, 17 wanted to call police or call 911, but her boyfriend prevented her from doing it. He was one of the people in the house at the party, as I mentioned earlier. They didn't call police. they left her there with debilitating injuries, heavily intoxicated, and clearly not able to get up and call a cab and go home. I was unable to learn how they leave the house and if they knew, like if they went outside and saw her there dead. But then
that's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't in front of the house when she was found. She was found, like, I should have brought up a map, but no, she was not found in front of the house.
Okay, because I was under the impression she was found like in like a field, like in the yard kind of thing.
Yeah, if it was their yard, technically it was their property. Mm-hmm. From my understanding, this person, the person that found her, the woman that found her, it was closer to her house.
Really? Okay.
Which was close enough to the house that it happened in, mm-hmm. because the lawn in front of the house that it happened in was set on fire, which eventually reached the woman who found Serena's house.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when I was going through this, the court, like what came out in court is there was so many holes in the narrative to try to follow it, to figure out exactly what happened. So I'm glad you're able to fill in that point. What did come out though in court, and which is more clear, is that at least initially there was an effort by these two and some of their friends to kind of like organize and do some damage control. And I wouldn't call it a cover up, but for a little while there, they were saying like, are we going to be able to get away with this? And if you go on the internet, I've seen a lot of this stuff because screenshots of messages between 16 and 17 and to others have leaked around the internet, where one screenshot was 17 asking a friend who is probably the person who filmed it to delete the video. Or to delete the videos and get rid of any messages we sent each other last night. 17 and her boyfriend also, they went to a guy's house that was at the party and they asked him to change his story about like when they left and what happened with the fight. So there was a lot of that kind of thing happening, like, say we left early or say there was a little fight and then Serena walked away with a bloody nose. Like they were all kind of.
And I believe those messages were sent, or some of them at least, after Serena was found.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought I know one of the girls, either 16 or 17, messaged the other one and they said like, oh my God, she was found dead. And if they ask you anything, just say it wasn't that bad. And, something along the lines of that.
I just like, how on earth did they ever expect that they were going to be able to get away from a crime that's videotaped, right, and it's being spread around the internet amongst your school and members of your small community? But that's what happened. And another thing that 17 did, this is a kind of a weird one, is she was asked to go to the RCMP to talk because, again, this is Monday. So, because on Monday, 16 goes to the guidance counselor, tells her side of the story. The guidance counselor gets the RCMP involved. 17's name is now pulled into it, and she's asked to go give a statement at the RCMP office. She realizes that the boots she's wearing are the same boots that she was using in the video to stomp on Serena's face. So before going to the RCMP, she goes to a friend's house and asks, like, can I wear your boots? Like, I want to swap boots. So 17 puts on her friend's boots and puts her own boots in her car and goes to the RCMP office. During the statement with the RCMP, I guess it didn't go well because the police end up searching her car and find the boots, her bloody boots from the video. And that's when they realize.
Why not just leave them?
It's just... Yeah, well, it's as insane and brutal and stupid and thoughtless as their crime is. Their attempt at covering it up is equally like just nonsensical and awful.
It's yeah.
Eventually, 16 and 17 would both plead guilty. Again, with 16 being charged with manslaughter, being to be tried as a young offender, 17 for second-degree murder. Both admit to it, but both kind of downplay their involvement to an extent. Based on what we just read through, do you have any idea why one had a more serious charge than the other?
One had a better lawyer.
Do you think that? And that's kind of what I was thinking. Like, I know when these kind of negotiations happen, when guilty pleas come in and stuff, when there is a negotiation of what you'll plead guilty. So
Yeah.
maybe that's it. The only thing I could think of is 17 was the second person to be beating Serena in the video, and it's the second person who's like actually stomping on her head, which is a more vicious attack than a punch to the face. But I don't know. Like when I see what happened, I'm like, those two did that to her. Not, each one did something separate. They're both even communicating. I don't want to see her alive.
I was just going to say, like, in so few cases, do you have verbal recorded evidence like that?
And not only verbal, you see them.
Still caught a manslaughter charge.
Yeah,
that wasn't an accident. She just admitted that there was intent.
They do have like sentencing hearings, so there is some coverage of their actions during the trial and sentencing hearings. They made statements apologizing. I'm going to play you news coverage of 16's trial. I'm calling it a trial, but really it's hearings related to her sentencing. This is before her sentence is delivered, but this gives a lot of information about what happened in the courtroom and, what she had to say.
The girl who was 16 at the time of the attack last year took 3 deep breaths and apologized to Serena McKay's family and friends in court. I took what must have meant the entire world to you, Serena's gifted and blessed life, the teen said. I can never be at peace with myself knowing what I've done. I despise myself every day for letting it get that far. The older girl was sentenced as a youth last month to 3 years in jail for second-degree murder. Today, the younger teen's defense lawyer argued she should get the maximum youth sentence for manslaughter, which is 3 years. He pointed to a psychiatric assessment of the teen, which said she struggled with PTSD, alcohol addiction, and had the moral capacity of a young person prone to poor decision making. He said she has no prior criminal record and turned herself into police after McKay's body was found. He also argued there was no evidence to suggest who started the fight. Now, the Crown is arguing the teen led the brutal attack and should be sentenced as an adult. The judge has reserved her decision until August.
So we're hearing that piece. At this point, 17 has already been sentenced for 3 years for second-degree murder, that's a very short sentence. But I guess when you're tried as a young offender, that's what you get. It looks like 16 was facing, although a different charge with manslaughter. It sounds like she was still facing ultimately the same punishment. But we'll get to her actual sentence shortly. But it's when we started this episode, we talked a little bit about Sagkeeng First Nation and the trouble and social problems that are happening in that community. A lot of what has come out during the trial is about the background on 16 and 17 and the circumstances that have put them in the position to be involved in this crime. And they're like, what they did is horrible and evil, but when you learn about their lives, I dare say they didn't live the kind of childhoods that you or I lived or that anyone we knew lived. Like they, both of them had addiction in their lives and in their families' lives from the very beginning, abuse, dysfunctional relationships from the very beginnings. And it's that was something that was discussed at length and very much considered in their sentencing. And it almost makes it an even more horrific story because it's like you see what they did and it's like I want to hate them, but then when you learn more about their backgrounds and the cards that they were dealt from the beginning, you're kind of like I don't know.
We have to remember you're a product of your environment.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're brought up and taught that you solve a problem by fighting, that's just what you know.
Mm-hmm.
That
But this is different than fighting because this is like it's. I don't know how they didn't know that they were killing her. You when you hear the video, the voices, they all sound drunk and wild, but they also sound just like vicious and evil. And one other thing we didn't touch on, but this is relevant. What actually killed Serena, and maybe this is another element that makes this even darker, is it wasn't the actual beating that killed her. The beating made it so that she was unable to get up and get out of the elements. She ended up dying from hypothermia because they left her clinging to life. So she just laid in the grass overnight in April in Manitoba, and that's what killed her. She was heavily intoxicated, certainly wasn't breathing well after everything that happened to her, and that's,
if she was conscious, I'd be surprised.
There's no way, and I think
there's no way.
I think a bit of mercy in it was the fact that she was probably unconscious for the majority of what's seen in that video.
Yeah,
there's no way she wasn't.
And you know what, even if it was summer, I have this feeling that she would have succumbed to her injuries.
Yeah, I thought that
like
too.
Her brain had a bleed. Something like there was internal damage.
Yeah.
She wasn't walking away.
Yeah, when I read that she died of hypothermia as the cause of death, I was surprised by that. But
and that also might have been the 16 and 17 saving grace in being tried as they were.
What saved them, as far as the extent of their punishment, is the fact that they were tried as young offenders. That cuts a sentence from life to making the max, I think, 7 years for second-degree murder for a young offender rather than life.
I think it's 3 or 4.
So I think, but it's like some small amount of time like that. And I think a lot of the decision to move it from adult court to young offenders court was more about their upbringing and the cards they were dealt socially and economically.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
So I think as far as giving them like a second chance at life, I think that was what led to that decision.
Okay.
Let's get to 16 sentencing. So we just heard a bit about the questions that she was faced with in court and statements that she made. But here's reporting on the actual sentencing.
It was a very emotional day for the family of Serena McKay. There were lots of tears and anger as the sentence was handed down to a 17-year-old girl who pleaded guilty of manslaughter in the death of Serena McKay. Now, the family, they were all wearing red t-shirts today with pictures of Serena McKay saying justice for Serena.
Everybody's really upset, and this was not the outcome that we expected at all. And I just have no faith anymore in the system.
The 17-year-old girl was given a maximum youth sentence of 3 years, 2 years to be served in custody, and 1 year of conditional supervision. The Crown had wanted the teen sentenced as an adult, saying 3 years would be too lenient given the callousness of the crime. Another teen who pleaded guilty to second-degree murder was sentenced back in June to 40 months in custody, followed by 23 months of community supervision. Now, the family doesn't believe that they will ever get justice for Serena McKay.
My daughter didn't deserve to die. And we didn't have to lose her over this. She was a good girl.
The family of Serena McKay is calling for changes to the Youth Criminal Justice Act. They want tougher laws in place for teens who are convicted of horrific crimes like this one.
Hello, listeners. Sorry to pull you out of the episode like this, but I want to take a moment and remind you of the benefits of a nighttime premium feed subscription. First of all, I release the episodes ad-free and 2 days early on the premium feed, which gives you the show quicker and a lot less painfully. Secondly, I maintain a full back catalog of nighttime episodes and countless hours of bonus content only on the premium feed, so to give you more of the show than any sane person would probably even want to listen to. And the third thing, premium feed subscribers who do so annually get a discounted rate and receive a free swag pack by mail. Who doesn't love mail? And lastly, but hopefully most importantly, the premium feed will fund the creation of the show. My mics, my laptop, the little lights on my desk, it's all paid for by the combined efforts of the premium feed subscribers. So if any of this sounds good to you, for about the price of a cup of coffee, you can go premium right now at patreon.com/nighttimepodcast. I want to thank you for considering it. Now, let's get back to the episode. So in the end, with the exception of a couple months difference, they both basically get the same sentence, which is 3 years in prison with some supervision when they get out. I think roughly a year of supervision once they're released for each of them.
I'd be surprised if they didn't get time served as well.
Yeah, that always.
So
the sentencing and all that, it always upsets me. I hate even talking about it because even when you say the numbers, they get 3 years. What does that mean? Because they always get so much credit for the time served waiting for their trial and all this.
Exactly.
And then they always get out for good behavior anyway. So it's like,
yeah,
what's the point of any of it? But then we've talked about this before, but then the idea of like, is going to prison about being punished, or is it about being rehabilitated so you don't do it again? And
right.
The forward-facing view of our prison system is it's all about rehabilitation. We're going to give you the support and services you need so that when you get out, you can function in society. But what the public isn't told is, but all of that stuff is voluntary. You can just come to this prison and hang out for 2 or 3 years and just be released. So I think
compare it to like a really visually pleasing avocado, and then you open it up and it's all like brown and gross. That's what our prison system is like.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
They try and dress it up and they're like, we're about rehabilitation. But
And then when you have a small community that these people are connected to, when they get out 3 years later, like do 16 and 17 just go back to Sagkeeng and rejoin their circle of friends that, in 3 years, that's not a lot of time, especially when you're talking about something like this, like you go back
such a small place. Well, it has been alleged to me. Like I said, I posted about Serena on my TikTok over a year ago. And if it's one thing I've learned about doing anything on the internet, is that people will say anything on the internet. Mm-hmm. So there have been quite a few things alleged to me about this case from people from Sagkeeng. It's alleged that this fight was not only over alcohol, but it was over a boy.
Ooh. Okay, I
which
saw some
somehow makes it worse.
I saw some murmurs of that online. One thing I heard, and I found a blog post that seemed to be like, I started reading it because I'm like, oh, like this, whoever wrote this, they know the case, and I'm reading through it. Like they had photos of the perpetrators, and so they were obviously breaching the publication ban. They even had posted on this blog a photo of either 16 or 17 covered in blood, and it looked like it was a Snapchat photo. So she's like sitting in a chair just like covered in blood, and the caption is just chilling.
And it was Serena's blood that was sent that night. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But what came up in that photo was chilling. And she's big smile on her face. Like, I just beat someone up. What came out in this blog was they said, the author said that they tried to make it look like it was like a sexual assault. Did you hear this?
That's also what I read. Okay. I read they see, and this is, perhaps I'm wrong about them moving the body. Maybe they just went far enough away from the house and fought. That I'm unsure of. But I read that they tried to dishevel her clothes to fake a sexual assault, to make it look like it was a sexual assault.
I couldn't find anything about it in what was reported on about the actual trials and sentencing. But when I read that, I was like, whoa, like that would have come out in the news. And what I see in the screenshots of the conversations when 16 and 17 are trying to cover their tracks a bit is they're trying to get people to say there was a fight, yes, but then Serena just left.
Yeah.
She went off on her own. So it's almost like they're trying, like it would make sense that maybe they were trying to lead people to think Serena left and something bad happened to her, in the field on the way home or something. But again, I haven't found any like official corroborating evidence. I've just seen that you found it however you did, but I found it in a blog post by someone who seemed to know what they were talking about and have access to all the photos and stuff of these people. But where's this at now? Do you have any, because you've covered this recently, where are these girls now? Because their sentences would be expired by now or expiring.
Just from comments on TikTok. These girls are absolutely not welcome back in Sagkeeng.
Okay.
One commenter said, "Oh yeah, she dated my buddy from another reserve, and we like bullied her out." Like, they are not welcome anywhere. However, to my knowledge, they both have significant others and children.
Wow.
So, and yeah, I neither of them are in Sagkeeng. I know that because yeah, they would not be smart to go back there.
No, that makes sense. And I don't know if it's the case with them, but sometimes even when you're released, like there are conditions like that. Like what's of where you can go. I'm thinking of where I'm from, Cape Breton. There was a major crime I covered on my podcast before we called it the Sydney River McDonald's murders, which was just a robbery gone wrong turned mass murder at a McDonald's restaurant in Sydney, where I'm from. The people involved are slowly being released from prison, but so far there's 3 of them that did it. 2 of them are released, and both were released with conditions that they can't return to Cape Breton Island, where it happened.
Good.
The infamy related to the crime. I would think with this, especially in a small community of 3,000 people, there should be something to prevent them from just walking in there. And maybe they're rehabilitated and they're completely different people. I still think it's in everyone's best interest to just do not go back.
Yeah, don't chance it. You'd be a fool.
Yeah, it's just shocking to me. And in reading about this story, I found several reports from the time when this was happening of people talking about how the idea of crime being live streamed and crime being like filmed and uploaded, that's kind of like a new thing that, is going to become more and more prevalent. That certainly has happened, and it's only going to get worse. There's an interest in, there are people out there who want to see these things. There are people who commit crimes that want notoriety, and it all comes together with live streaming. There's been, just off the top of my head, I can think of a bunch of cases. I guess the most recent and probably most extreme version was the mass shooting in Christchurch in New Zealand, where a man, and this was well thought out and everything. He wore a GoPro on his helmet. He had a military helmet on. He had a GoPro broadcasting live on, I think it was on Twitch, and he had a machine gun. I call it a machine gun because I don't know firearms. And he went into a mosque in New Zealand and just walked from room to room shooting everybody.
And live streamed
the whole thing. Then he leaves the church, he goes out in his car and he's driving around shooting out his window, live streaming. There was guy who did a live streamed a shooting at a grocery store last year, I think. There was a guy here's a brutal one. There was a guy I think he was in Cleveland in the United States a couple years ago. He had a really bad breakup and he was mad at his ex who just threw him out. So he went on Facebook Live and he's ranting and raving about her throwing him out. And as he's ranting on Facebook Live, he's like, "I'm going to kill somebody. She's making me do this. She's killing this guy." And he's driving and there's this old man walking down the street, like a 70-year-old man. So he stops his car and he gets out of the car while holding his phone, live streaming, and he starts talking to the man. He's like, "How old are you, sir?" And the guy's just looking kind of confused at him. And he says to the guy, he's like, "Say the name, or say, whatever it was. I can't recall what her name was, but he's like, say, Jane Doe." And the man looks confused, and the man says, "Jane Doe." And then the guy with the camera says, "I want you to say Jane Doe's name because it's her fault what's about to happen to you." And then you see the man put his hands up, and the guy just kills him, gets back in his car and is ranting about, Jane, all the horrible things Jane Doe did to him. But it's these people it's a bit different in Serena's case, but not that different, because this video was filmed and shared across Facebook initially by people who were involved in the beating death. It's evil.
And it's I understand the internet is a dark and evil place. It can be. When you live stream or post something like that I'm sure that there has to be some sort of charge people will try and, sue someone for, because you did not consent to see that. And that,
Yeah.
that can really disturb some people.
Yeah, we ended with the video of 16 being sentenced, and we hear Serena's mom describe her disappointment in the ultimate verdict. I think the big complaint that her family and supporters had was that they were tried as children, because it reduces the sentence from, with a manslaughter had the maximum of whatever it was, like 3 years, rather than, a much longer sentence. And yeah, I completely agree with that. If this happened to my family member or my child, and I don't even want to think about that, but if this happened to my family member or someone I knew, and the person who did it got 3 years in a youth prison, man, that is not justice.
No.
And that's not enough time to, even if you have the best services in the prison to make it so that you can come out and be a functioning member of society afterwards, if you're someone who can do this to someone, it's going to take more than 3 years to fix that. No question.
Exactly. If rehabilitation is possible, it's going to take a while.
Hell yeah. It's going to take a lifetime. I think it's going to take 25 years. I think a life sentence would have been appropriate, just purely due to how vicious and brutal this is. So anyone who could, if you can do this to someone, you're such a damaged person that it's not a simple couple years and a social rehab is not going to fix that.
And it's just so obvious that it was intentional. Like it was, they were on a mission and they did it. Ugh.
Yeah. Well, I think we've covered we've spent enough time in the darkness. I think we are ready to walk away from this one. Anything else you want to get into about this, or anything else you want to say other than how shocking and horrific this is?
I'm trying to think. I think we covered everything. And...
You did. Did you not do a 2-part series about this? I know you had in my research, I kept coming up to your YouTube videos.
Yes. Well, but those are just my crime talks. So they're 3 minutes each. So it's only about 6 minutes. Yeah.
If a crime talk is pasted to YouTube, it becomes a YouTube video by definition.
Perfect.
So you cannot draw the line. That's not my YouTube. That's my TikTok on YouTube. I would say for anyone curious, do not seek out the video. It's not something anyone should see. It's horrific.
I watched the few seconds that I did just by happenstance. I was researching the case, looking for news broadcasts. And I ended up on a reaction video and saw a few seconds, and I was like, that's enough. I'm good. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
not the gist.
I think reading a description and using your imagination is more than enough. And seeing this in this story, it backs up my idea that the people I'm scared of, people will ask me sometimes, like, you're always covering like crime and this dark stuff. Like, aren't you like afraid being around people because it's all you talk about and look into? I'm never afraid of like this idea of like this serial killer or this, a crazy thing happening. Who I'm afraid of when I'm out in public usually is like 13, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds. Because I feel like it's people at that age, they're big enough that they can be physically harm someone and get access to dangerous things, but they're still like kids in a lot of ways. They have nothing to lose. They haven't yet learned, a lot of them, or some of them haven't learned like right from wrong, and they can just be so impulsive. My fear when I'm in public often is that I'm just going to walk by some 16-year-old and they're just going to like stab me in the neck and start laughing. And then I'm going to fall to the ground and notice that one of their friends is filming it. And then they're just going to run off.
Like something just happened at a mall here.
Are you serious? I just completely made that crime up. But that's that's the kind of, I see that playing out in my head sometimes. I'm like, that's not how I want to go out with some punk kid. And that's how.
And it's rampant. I don't know what it's like in Halifax, but right now here, bear spray is like a big thing.
Okay.
And they, like places get bear sprayed all the time. Very, very odd.
When we were kids, we used, do you know what stink bombs are? They're little glass vials with it's like a little tiny piece of glass that has some chemical in it. And I think
I remember these.
Yeah, that chemical I heard is they add a little bit of that the point of that chemical is a little bit's added to propane so that if there's a gas leak, you can smell it. But stink bombs are like a vial of it. And one little tiny vial of it, you could go, I'll say because we did it. We would get them, you take them to the mall and you just lay it on the floor and walk, away, and you sit on a bench and you wait until someone walks over the vial and steps on it and it'll crack. And the smell will be so intense that they will like evacuate a section of the mall. Or we would drop it in school and have the same result. But, that was kind of
That's fairly harmless.
Yeah, it
wasn't
on the
bear
line.
spray. It wasn't mace.
No, but when we were kids, like that was like a crazy prank. But now when everyone's videotaping each other and raising the bar, and they're comparing like the market for pranks. When I was a kid, we were just competing with other people in my town of 25,000. But people now who are doing pranks, they're videoing it and they're on TikTok or whatever, and they're competing with like this channel in Russia that's doing this the craziest stuff on earth, that sort of thing. So I think like everything is just getting ramped up and the temperature is rising, and people.
Well, it's like Jackass without the warning before it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Mm-hmm. What a world. Well, Madelayne, we've been down this road long enough. Let's wrap this up. We'll meet again though next Thursday night, and we'll be talking something interesting then as well.
I'll be here, as always.
I want to thank you for joining Madelayne and I for this episode of Nighttime. But before we part here, I have some thanks. First, a big thanks to Monty Datta, who contributed the music for this episode. I'd also like to thank LJ from the Dystopian Simulation podcast, who provides this series' intro and outro voiceovers. But lastly, and most importantly, I have a massive thank you to everyone who listens to Nighttime, as without your interest and your support, this show would be as pointless as it would be impossible. And on the topic of support, let me thank the newest subscribers of the premium feed, Tyler, Jerry, and Kate. Thank you for your generous support. If anyone else would like to support the show, but can't do it by way of a premium feed subscription, you can give me a big hand by simply sharing this episode on social media and letting some like-minded friends know what we're doing here. If you have any story ideas, if you want to give feedback on the show, you can reach me at nighttimepodcast.com/contact. I hope to hear from you. But until then, take care of each other, hug your loved ones tight, and let me know if you see anything weird.
The Nighttime Podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Jordan Bonaparte.